Are you comfy? Are you cozy? Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a woman who wished with all her heart to have a little baby, but none arrived. After it seemed forever, she went to visit the good fairy and begged her to help. "Here is a magical seed," said the good fairy. "Plant it in a sunny place in the garden and watch for the magic to begin." The woman obeyed as the good fairy had ordered, and in the springtime a beautiful flower grew. It had white petals on the outside with a little bit of yellow in the middle, and in the middle grew 3 lilac purple petals. They were closed. "This is the prettiest flower ever," thought the woman, and she bent down to give it the tiniest little kiss. As she did so, the lilac purple blossom sprang open. Inside was the prettiest little baby girl you could ever imagine. She was so tiny, and as she grew, she only grew to be as big as the woman's thumb. And the lady and her husband named their child Thumbelina. Thumbelina's cradle was a polished seashell. A violet flower provided the coverlet, and red rose petals provided the pillow for Thumbelina's head. This is where Thumbelina slept each night. During the daytime, she played on the kitchen table, where the woman baked bread and made apple jacks for dinner. Whilst her mum baked, Thumbelina danced around the table, and sometimes, as a special treat, Thumbelina's mum placed the prettiest bowl of water on the table. Inside, she placed a pink camellia flower as a boat and gave Thumbelina 2 toothpicks to use as oars, and she rowed around her own tiny lake. As she rowed, she sang in the prettiest voice you could ever imagine. "I love to sing, I love to dance, I love to row, 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 Thumbelina with my bow. Oh, Thumbelina loves to dance and sing. I love to row my boat, tring, tring. Thumbelina, Thumbelina, row, row, row. Oh, Thumbelina with my bow, bow, bow." One night, as Thumbelina lay in her tiny little bed, a great, big, ugly, green frog crept through the open window. "What a pretty young maiden," the frog croaked when she saw Thumbelina. "Oh, she'd make a fine wife for my son." Picking up the little seashell cradle, she carried Thumbelina away to her home in the nearby wood. The frog's son was even bigger and uglier than his mother. When he saw beautiful Thumbelina, he croaked with delight. "Rush, you'll wake her," his mama scolded. "We'd better put this young maiden on a lily pad in the middle of our stream. That way she won't be able to run away. So the old green frog swam out to the largest lily pad in the middle of the stream, and on it she placed the little seashell cradle with Thumbelina inside. When Thumbelina awoke in the morning, she found herself in her little bed on the great green lily pad with water all around. She began to cry. She couldn't see any way to get back to dry land. And then the two big, ugly frogs came swimming up to the lily pad. Quack, quack. I'd like to introduce you to my son, Gribbik, Gribbik, croaked the mama frog. He's going to be your husband, and I'm preparing the most lovely home for you down in the muddiest part of the stream that I can find. Gribbik, Gribbik, croaked her son in agreement. When they finally left, Thumbelina began to weep her little heart out. She didn't want to marry an ugly green frog and live in the muddiest part of the stream. Some little golden fish swimming in the stream heard Thumbelina sobbing. They peeked out of the water to see what was the matter. When they saw how sad Thumbelina looked, they felt very sorry for her. A lovely young maiden like that shouldn't have to marry an ugly green frog if she doesn't want to. We cannot allow this, they agreed. So they all gathered beneath the lily pad and chomped and chomped and chomped away at the stalk until the lily pad broke free and floated down the stream. Oh, Thumbelina floated past great forests, pastures filled with yellow mustard, and bustling busy towns. The chirping birds looked down at her and sang. Twitter, 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 twee, the girl in the seashell boat is so pretty. Twitter, 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 twee, the girl in the seashell boat is free. A dragonfly who was flying overhead spotted Thumbelina as she floated and sang her way down the stream. He swooped down and seized her in his 6 insect legs and carried her over to a nearby bush. The dragonfly put Thumbelina down on a leaf near the top of the bush, and he settled down beside her. He told her she was very pretty, although she didn't look like a dragonfly at all, and he said he would like to make her his wife. Fairly soon the other dragonflies flew around to meet Thumbelina, but when they saw her, they turned up their wings in horror. How strange! How ugly! They cried. Why, she has only 2 legs, not 6. And why, she has no feelers, she has no wings. Why, dragonfly, she looks just like a human being. When the dragonfly heard what his friends were saying, he decided he wanted nothing more to do with her. He flew her down from the bush and set her upon a daisy in the middle of a field. Thumbelina began to cry yet again because she thought she was too ugly for even the dragonfly to want. Though, of course, as we know, she was prettier than the prettiest flower there was. That summer, Thumbelina lived all alone in the field. She wove herself a bed of grass and hung it between 2 stalks of wheat to keep off the rain. She ate the corn as it ripened and drank the dew from the leaves. autumn came and went, and before long the cold winter had arrived. The chirping birds flew south, the leaves changed colour, and the corn was picked by the farmers. Thumbelina no longer had a protected place to hang her bed. And then the snow began to fall. Oh, and dear Thumbelina almost froze to death. She was so little, and compared to her, the snowflakes were huge, and they nearly buried her. She wrapped herself in the last remaining dry leaf to keep warm. Brrr, it was so cold. One day, Thumbelina's teeth were chattering so loudly that a field mouse stuck his head up to see what was the matter. The field mouse lived in warmth and comfort under the corn roots. A fire heated the kitchen, and the storerooms were stocked with corn. Brrr, shivering, Thumbelina said, "Oh, please, field mouse, could I have something to eat?" Everyone knows that field mice are very generous. "Of course, come on in and have some supper with me." After they had eaten, the field mouse said, "I know. How about you cook and clean for me and tell me your lovely stories, and then you may stay with me as long as you'd like." "That's a wonderful idea," said Thumbelina, and soon the field mouse and Thumbelina were happily living side by side. "Guess what?" said the field mouse one day. "We're going to have a visitor. He's wealthy, and he wears a beautiful black waistcoat. Oh, he'd make such a lovely husband for you, Thumbelina. But there's one thing. He is blind, so you must be sure and tell him one of your most amusing stories." Soon enough at tea time, the visitor arrived. He was certainly very wealthy, and there was no doubt he knew very many things. But Thumbelina was just not very interested in him. You see, he was a mole, and because he didn't know much about the flowers in the sun, which he'd never seen, of course, he just made fun of them. Thumbelina did not want to let down her friend the field mouse, so she told the mole her best stories and sang for him in her sweet, clear voice. Soon enough, the mole fell in love with her, though he didn't tell her quite yet, for he was a cautious mole, as most moles are. The mole was very proud of himself, for he had most recently dug a long tunnel between his house and the field mouse's house. One day, he invited the field mouse and Thumbelina to pay him a visit for tea time, and he even offered to guide them through the tunnel himself. "But you must not be alarmed by the dead bird that lies in the middle of the tunnel," he told them. "Dead bird that lies in the middle of the tunnel," thought Thumbelina. She was a little alarmed, but the field mouse and the mole didn't seem concerned at all. Off they proceeded down the tunnel. When they came to the dead bird, the mole pushed his nose through the roof of the tunnel by accident, and the earth caved in, letting the sun shine through. "Oh dear," thought Thumbelina, "poor bird." It was a swallow. His wings were pulled in close to his side, and his head was tucked beneath his feathers. Thumbelina was so sad. He must have died of cold, she thought, and she recalled all the beautiful birds who had sung to her so wonderfully over the summertime. The mole used his nose to push the swallow to one side. "Well, this swallow certainly won't be singing again," he said. "I'm so glad my children won't be birds. I mean, what is the good of singing all summer if you only die of cold when the winter comes?" Thumbelina didn't say anything because she didn't want to be impolite, but when the field mouse and the mole had gone a little further down the tunnel, she quickly bent down and kissed the swallow. "Bye-bye, dear little bird," she whispered. "Perhaps it was you who sang so beautifully to me all summer long." That night Thumbelina could not sleep at all. Finally, she got out of bed and wove a lovely thick blanket out of hay, and then she carried the blanket to the dead swallow and carefully covered him with it. "Farewell, beautiful bird," she whispered, laying her head on the bird's chest. Ba-boom! She was startled. Ba-boom! Ba-boom! It was a loud thumping noise. It was the bird's heartbeat. The swallow was not dead, but only in a faint from the cold. Thumbelina couldn't help feeling just a little bit frightened because the swallow was so much larger than her. But she bravely wrapped the blanket tightly around him and tiptoed away. The next night, Thumbelina again visited the swallow. He was alive and he was awake, but very, very weak. Thank you for saving me," he whispered. "What's your name?" "My name is Thumbelina, and you're very welcome," she replied. "Oh, I'd really like to fly out into the sunshine," said the swallow. No, not yet," said Thumbelina. "It's still very cold. Keep still, and I will take care of you and feed you and keep you warm until the spring comes around." And every night after that, she would bring the swallow some food and quietly nurse the swallow back to health. At long last, springtime arrived, and the swallow was well enough to fly. Thumbelina scooped out more dirt from the hole the mole had originally made, and the warm sunlight flooded through. The sky was so bright and blue that the swallow begged Thumbelina to come fly away with him. "You can sit on my back," he said. "I'll fly you into the green woods." But Thumbelina said no, thank you. She did not want to hurt her friend, the field mouse's feeling, by leaving her that way. "Farewell for now, little friend," the swallow said, and then he spread his wings and soared into the blue, blue sky. Thumbelina watched him fly away, tears glinting in her eyes. Oh, how she wished she could follow him into the bright sunlight. But alas, she felt she owed it to her friend the field mouse to stay behind. The corn grew high, ripe and yellow, until it looked like a forest to Thumbelina. "Oh, Thumbelina, I'm so excited," the field mouse said. "It's time to prepare your wedding dress. The mole has asked for your hand in marriage." Oh dear. Now Thumbelina had to sit spinning day and night, night and day. The field mouse even found her 4 lovely spiders to help her so the dress would be finished in time. Every evening the polite mole came to call. He even made Thumbelina sing her favorite song. "Twitter, twitter, 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 twee, the girl in the seashell boat is so pretty. Twitter, 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 twee, the girl in the seashell boat is free." "We will be married as soon as the summer is over," said the mole proudly. Poor Thumbelina. She didn't wish to marry the mole at all. Every morning when the sun rose, and every evening when the sun set, she tiptoed out from sewing her wedding dress and looked out at the setting sun or the rising sun and the bright blue sky. Oh, how she longed to see her friend the swallow just one more time. The weather began to change. The autumn winds blew. The corn was picked by the farmer. And finally, Thumbelina's wedding dress was beautifully finished. "You will be married the day after tomorrow," the field mouse happily told her. Thumbelina couldn't hold the lie to herself one more moment. "I'm so sorry, field mouse," she said, "but I just don't want to marry the mole. He's very nice and he's very respectful, but I just cannot live without sunlight and blue skies and singing birds and beautiful flowers." "Don't be silly," said the field mouse. "You're just having wedding nerves. He's very handsome and he's very wealthy. Why, you should be grateful to have such a mole want to marry you." Thumbelina felt very sad, but she dried up her tears and she went outside one last time. "Farewell, purple flowers and yellow flowers and red roses. Say hello to my friend the swallow if you ever see him again. Twitter, 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 twee. It's your friend the swallow, it's me." Thumbelina's friend the swallow was back and overjoyed to see her. When she told him she was to marry the mole and live underground where the sun never shone, the swallow said, "Come with me instead. Come with me and be free. I'm flying south for the winter. Why, you may jump on my back and take out the bow in your hair and use it to hold on to my feathers as we fly. I will take you away from the gloomy mole and his dark passages forever. We will fly to warm places where the sun shines even more brightly than it does here, and the flowers are always blooming. Please come. Why, I have never forgotten how you saved my life when I lay frozen in that dark tunnel." "I will come," she said. She climbed onto the swallow's back, took the bow out of her hair that her mother had lovingly placed so many years ago. She tied it safely onto the swallow's feathers on his back, and off they flew, high into the sky. They flew across great oceans and beautiful mountains covered in sparkling snow, over green forests and the great plains covered with lions and roaming wildebeest. At last they came to the clearest blue lake that anyone could imagine. Beside it, surrounded by tall green trees, stood the most beautiful palace of white gleaming marble. On the roof there were thousands of swallows' nests, and Thumbelina could hear all the birds twittering and tweeting and singing their bird song. On the ground lay so many beautiful seashells of all different shapes and colors. Amongst the seashells grew the most beautiful white daisies with perfect yellow centers. Oh my! When Thumbelina looked around, she got the most delightful surprise anyone could imagine. A tiny little man, quite as big as Thumbelina, stood in the middle of one of the white flowers. On his head he wore a tiny little golden crown, and two delicate little wings grew from his shoulders. He was the fairy of the flower. For girls and boys, in every flower there lives either a tiny man or a woman, and this little man was king of all the flower fairies. When the Flower King saw Thumbelina, he thought she was the most beautiful creature he'd ever seen. "What's your name?" he asked. "My name is Thumbelina." "Will you be my wife?" asked the little man as he got down on one knee. Thumbelina, too, had fallen in love with the little Fairy King as soon as she saw him. "Why, yes," she said delightedly so. The flowers all opened their blossoms. Oh, and the scents were of lavender and lilac, oranges and lemons. And each flower fairy brought Thumbelina a gift, her favorite of which was a pair of tiny gossamer wings. The flower fairies fastened them to Thumbelina's shoulders so she too could fly from flower to flower just as they did. It was springtime when they got married, and the wedding of Thumbelina and the Fairy King was the most joyous occasion in the fairy kingdom. The swallow sang a wedding song. Oh, the most beautiful bird song you can imagine. It was both a happy and a sad song, for the swallow was saying farewell to his dear friend Thumbelina. "It's time for me to return to the north. Farewell, 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 my little friend. Farewell, 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 our story's at an end." Thumbelina and her Fairy King lived happily ever after. Now every springtime, all the birds sing the story of Thumbelina, and that is how we came to hear of this tale. Until we meet again, sweet dreams and sweet thoughts. Good night. Sleep tight.